Part 51. All Heaven's Unlimited Base. Author, Jingde Ren. Chapter 505. 499 Crazy City. A city appeared in front of everyone. This city is quite large. Although there are no tall buildings in the city, it looks orderly. One by one, the buildings are well planned and placed, and these buildings are well maintained, and there are no damaged buildings. Torch City, one of the largest cities in the East Third District. It is also the sphere of influence of the local warlord, Lu Weiwei, the experimenter of the Silver Group. Proceeding along the road that has obviously been re-leveled with cement, it soon entered the urban area. It can be seen that the border of the city has been carefully planned, unlike ordinary cities that first pass through rural areas, then the buildings gradually become denser, and finally enter the urban area. On the contrary, the edges of Torch City are as neat as if they had been cut with a paper knife. Outside is the road, followed by a circle of barbed wire and sentry towers, and then rows of neat factories and buildings. This is also a unique way of urban planning born in such an environment, because these cities are more faced with the pressure of survival than the pressure of population expansion. A checkpoint appeared on the road ahead, and two armored vehicles were parked under the watchtowers on both sides of the road. The red and black scorpion tail flag was flying on the watchtower, which was the flag of the Brotherhood of Nod. The machine gun equipped on the off-road vehicle pointed coldly at the vehicles passing by on the road. More than a dozen soldiers in red and black combat uniforms were checking in front of the checkpoint, followed by a few hunting dogs. The jeep began to slow down, and Drago was very skilled in driving the jeep behind a long queue into the city. Are the security measures here so strict? Chen Yuyan frowned. It wasn't like this before. These soldiers basically just charged a fee to enter the city. Now it's so strict, it probably started after Feng Tao's army was defeated by you last time. Drago said. Oh. It turned out that he was afraid of the T-virus, Chen Yuyan sneered in his heart. When it was their turn, Drago took out a 50-nod bill and handed it over. Then the soldiers outside the door looked at the people in the car, one of them led the hound to smell it, and the other took a scanner to scan around, and let it go directly after confirming that there was no problem. It's just commonplace for them to turn a blind eye to a few guns that are casually left on the seat of a jeep. Drago drove into the city and first passed through an industrial area. This industrial zone has a large area, and a large number of workers wearing dirty work clothes and dusty faces are working hard and numbly. On the other side of the loading and unloading square, truckloads of finished products are produced and boxed. On the road, you can also see teams of soldiers in red and black uniforms patrolling. These patrol soldiers can be said to be well equipped. Everyone is equipped with well-made combat uniforms and gas masks, and each team is equipped with an armored car. Looking at these soldiers, Drago murmured, "The situation is not good." "What's wrong?" Chen Yuyan asked with a frown. Drago secretly pouted at a group of patrolling soldiers passing by, and whispered, "Look at the assault rifles in their hands, this is the Gao-3 type. This assault rifle used to be the standard rifle of GDI. It is said that several million were produced. But then GDI is said to have replaced it with more advanced weapons, so these assault rifles were phased out, and many were smuggled out. Then what? Then the Brotherhood of Nod imitated this assault rifle with good performance and used it in their regular army for more than 10 years, but then it is said that some places started to change it. Do you understand? These are just patrols, and they are only second-tier and third-tier reserves, but they also use Gao-3, what does that mean?" Hanka said deeply, "It means that the first-line troops in Torch City have begun to use more advanced individual weapons. And what I can tell you is that when I came to Torch City half a year ago, the patrols here still used the old AK-47 and M-16 assault rifles." Drago said. "That is to say, if Torch City isn't changing weapons, then Nod is gradually becoming active again." Chen Yuyan's face darkened, and combined with the mysterious information he had obtained before, he sensed that the war was approaching step by step. Torch City's industrial production capacity is not yet large enough to change the weapons of individual soldiers at will, and there must be someone behind it. And you should have noticed along the way, Torch City has begun to use the triangular scorpion tail flag again. Previously they wouldn't dare to use Nod's flag so blatantly, Drago said. This shows that since they dare to raise the flag of Nod, they are not afraid to fight GDI. Hanka said. Nod, quietly revived, Chunyuan said slowly, but such a large-scale change of clothes, and not only for Torch City, as a global organization, Nod's change of clothes is definitely a must. Worldwide. Such a large-scale transportation and replacement, is GDI a fool and has no idea at all? Drago replied, there are rumors that Nod has a network of underground tunnels all over the world, but this has not been confirmed. If this is the case, then they are transported from underground, and GDI satellites are impossible to detect. Affected by ion storms, GDI satellites cannot monitor the whole world. They continued driving, slowing down and circling the city. In the city, you can occasionally see a live broadcast of a rally on the LED screens on some buildings. During the rally, a person in military uniform on the stage is giving a speech, and the audience below is cheering wildly, shaking Nod in their hands. The triangular scorpion tail banner of the Brotherhood. As a GDI Golden Eagle flag was lit, the atmosphere of the live broadcast reached its peak. Everyone roared crazily, waved and stomped their feet crazily, and the sound waves almost broke the speakers. Even through the screen, you can feel the terrifying, frenzied atmosphere. If this rally wasn't for staged shows, then Nod's influence is truly terrifying. No wonder GDI was established with G7 as the core, and GDI, which Yanguo also joined in the later period, has such a strong strength that it can only compete with Nod. But fortunately, there is not such a fanatical atmosphere in Torch City, and the passers-by only cast interested glances at these things. The jeep continued on, and a procession of several hundred people passed by. Everyone in the team held small scorpion-tailed flags and held up some slogans. Chunyuan looked over and found that most of these slogans were like take up arms and protect yourself. Resist GDI power, Kane guides us forward, use strength to achieve peace. Such. A young woman with a Nod logo on her face ran to the front of Chunyuan's jeep, and raised her hands forward at a 45 degrees angle. This is Nod's salute gesture, similar to a two-handed version of the salute. Because she had followed the parade for a while, the woman still couldn't calm down her excitement. She shouted to Chunyuan and the others, join the jihad. Brother! Join us! Worried about provoking this group of fanatical Nod believers, Drago could only slow down, took the Nod scorpion flag in the woman's hand and stuck it on the jeep, and said slowly, we are planning to buy a batch of weapons and equipment. Welcome to, well, the war. After speaking, without waiting for the woman to reply, he kicked the accelerator and drove forward at a faster speed. Behind them, the woman pointed at the Nod scorpion flag on the jeep and screamed loudly, look! Our new brother! Oh! New brother! Long live Nod! Long live the Brotherhood! Long live Kane! Amidst the cheers, Chunyuan's face became more and more ugly. Moreover, they also saw a team of trucks parked at the entrance of the residential area, full of strong male civilians, and some officers and soldiers were knocking on the door of each house, asking people to join the army. Those who are willing to join the army will be taken to the front of the truck to be registered, and then sent to the truck. They've already begun partial mobilization. Hank said a terrible fact lightly. Chunyuan took a deep breath and crossed his hands on his chin. Such a large-scale mobilization must be inseparable from the support of the Nod Brotherhood. The question now is, who is the target? Is it just our ruined city? Not if there is a unified command now, what is the battle plan they assign to Torch City, we must figure it out. In fact, there is not much difference. From Torch City's point of view, their main force is dispatched, and it is only a matter of minutes to destroy us. No matter what battle plan Nod assigns to them, it will have no effect. Drago said. All Heavens Unlimited Base. Author, Jingde Ren. Chapter 506. 500 Investigating Information. Have you ever thought about it, Chenyuyan said slowly, if the Nod Brotherhood is really so fanatical, then I can't think of any power on this planet that can stop them. GDI can't do it either. You haven't seen how terrifying GDI's armored units are, Drago said. However, Hanka understood Chenyuyan's meaning. You mean, although Nod's sphere of influence is very large, they are not actually monolithic inside? Drago nodded and said, this is indeed the case. For example, the current Nod is mainly divided into two largest factions. They are General Caesar Vega in South America and General Hassan in Cairo. They are the largest brotherhood of Nod warlords in the Western and Eastern hemispheres respectively. Chenyuyan snorted coldly and said, that's why we have an opportunity. The interior of Nod is not monolithic, and not every person in the Yellow Zone worships Cain as a god. He pointed to some residents who responded coldly. So, you want to find other Nod warlords who don't deal with Torch City? It's just an idea, but at least this time I saw the most terrifying side of Nod, and it also gave me a chance to take advantage of it. Chenyuyan said, according to my hunch, it is possible that the place between us and Nod, the struggle between the sex warlords, will be very long, but we must not allow GDI to participate, otherwise, it will be difficult for us to deal with the two forces at the same time. Well, these are just ideas without much basis, let's go. They walked around the city and found that Torch City is now in a state of looseness on the outside and tightness on the inside. On the surface, there is no difference, but in fact, if you observe carefully, you can find that they are moving at a very stable speed. Step by step towards war. Moreover, the preparation process of Torch City was orderly and not chaotic at all. It could be seen that the person behind the organization probably had extremely strong management ability. At this moment, suddenly a convoy of cars passed by on the street, and the cars on the road dodged one after another. But Drago didn't know about giving way. He moved a step slower and almost hit the car in front of the convoy. But anyway, he slammed the steering wheel to avoid it, and the jeep slammed into the street light next to it and stopped. Chenyuyan bumped his head on the front seat, sat up again, and looked at the convoy. All I saw was a luxurious convertible car in the middle of the convoy. A man and a woman were standing on the car, with smiles on their faces, waving to the crowd of onlookers who were gathering around them. Their goal should be the square in the city center. But when he saw this man and a woman, Chenyuyan was startled. He sensed a hint of danger. The woman was about 20 years old, with blonde hair and blue eyes and a hot figure. She was a very typical European beauty. Although there were not many clues to be seen from the outside, Chenyuyan's eyes were so vicious that he immediately noticed that the upper arms and thighs of this beauty were relatively thicker. From the perspective of ordinary people, they will only think that this beautiful woman has a well-proportioned and compact figure, and her buttocks are very beautiful. But Chenyuyan understood that this was the result of long-term exercise of limb flexibility. If you look at it in combination with this ostentation, this woman is likely to hold a high position in Torch City, and is a master. The other man should be an Oriental man, less than 30 years old, with a slender figure and wearing a pair of glasses, looking very gentle. But he seems to be wearing a pair of very heavy wrist armor, which completely wraps the wrist to the elbow, and looks a bit bloated. But this man didn't take it seriously. Chenyuyan also noticed that he had a movement of holding up his glasses, which was very natural. Obviously he was very used to the wrist armor that made his wrist more than twice as thick. They are experimenters. He came to this conclusion instantly. However, while Chenyuyan was looking at the pair of male and female experimenters, the man's eyes were also looking at this side, probably because he was attracted by Drago's small car accident, and soon his eyes fell on Chen Yuyan. Chen Yuyan's reaction was almost subconscious. He immediately raised his hands at a 45-degree angle and shouted in a hysterical manner, "Brotherhood! Jihad! Brotherhood! Jihad!" When the man saw Chen Yuyan's appearance, he didn't doubt him. The corner of his mouth twitched contemptuously, but he waved at him politely on the surface, and looked away. "That's Nidong and Marlowe, the right-hand men of Torch City warlord Lu Weiwei." Drago knew these two people and explained to Chen Yuyan. The experimenters' team of 3, Chen Yuyan felt something was wrong. The opponent's strength was stronger than expected. "How long have they been entrenched in Torch City?" Chen Yuyan asked. "About 10 years, Drago replied. 10 years? So long?" Chen Yuyan frowned. "If you are an experimenter, you should be able to do a lot of things in 10 years, why are you still in the silver group? Is the pace so slow?" In the beginning, they came to Torch City alone, only Lu Weiwei and Nidong. Then they participated in the gang struggle in Torch City. After working hard for more than 2 years, they finally unified Torch City, and were appointed by Nod as General and Captain Silver, and then Maro will join." Drago replied. Chen Yuyan closed his eyes and thought for a while, recalling what Lin Huo had told him about the rules of this Laplace multidimensional universe calculation system. Although this system can provide the function of traveling through time and space, the worlds traveled are random, and most importantly, the power in the main world must reach a certain level before being given another chance to travel through time and space. And to develop one's own power, it is not a matter of a day or two, but a long-term accumulation. That is to say, he himself has developed so fast because he has unlimited bases, but even so, his development has been restricted by many. If you look at it this way, then in fact, the trio of Lu Weiwei and the others should be the normal rhythm of experimenters in this world. From being alone to controlling a large city with hundreds of thousands of people, and owning an army with tens of thousands of people and even armored troops, this process does not take 10 years. The only question is, what exactly do they have in the world they travel through? Want to go to that meeting? Hank asked. There should be some information we want in the meeting. Don't go, find a bar or something to watch the live broadcast. Chen Yuyan shook his head. The unique temperament of the experimenter is actually quite outstanding. After all, every experimenter has at least one world that they can travel through freely. His words, deeds and dress must be somewhat out of tune with this world. His quick-wit acting just now escaped attention, but it would be stupid to run under the noses of other experimenters. There's a bar here that I'm more familiar with. Go over and have a look. After Drago finished speaking, he drove the car into an alleyway. A group of people walked into a bar called 39°C, which was already very lively. The huge screen above the bar was broadcasting live the event hosted by Nidong and Marlowe. Not surprisingly, it was an incitement the activities of war. General Lu built the Torch City into a prosperous city, becoming the second largest city in the East 3 districts. And our strength can also be ranked in the top 5 in the East 3rd district. Now, an opportunity is before us. We should decisively send troops, launch jihad, and occupy more cities. On the screen, Marlowe was giving a speech hard, and there were also some singing and dancing activities. From this point of view, the assembly was actually well organized. But there are not many people in the bar who really pay attention to the live broadcast. The people here don't seem to have much interest in Kane, Nod, or jihad. There are even some people whispering about topics like GDI might call tomorrow, should we run away or something like that. Drago took Hank to the mercenaries to find information. Chen Yuyan's method was also simple and straightforward. He directly ordered a bottle of the most expensive wine, and with his good looks and sweet words, he quickly got on fire with the 3 girls, sitting together drinking and chatting. Although Ruin City started to use its own currency, it doesn't mean that they can't get the money used by Nod. After all, in the yellow zone, this is the hard currency. The next morning, Chunyuan got up from the bed contentedly, looked at the messy room and the vaguely visible human figures under the quilt, smiled, threw a few Nod gold bills on the bed, turned and left. Thank you for the 600 starting coins rewarded by the great demon king of the abyss. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. All Heavens Unlimited Base. Author, Jingde Ren. Chapter 507. 501 Out of Town. Early the next morning, Chunyuan met Drago and Hank and exchanged information. Currently, Torch City is preparing for battle, and seems to be receiving a large amount of weapons and equipment through some channel. The question now is, how far has Torch City's preparations come, where did their weapons and equipment come in, and most importantly, when did they start? Torch City's news blockade is very good, and we can't find out more things. I can feel the existence of plainclothes spies in the city, so it's not easy to make it too obvious. Drago said, and recently, General Tailong has been harassing the farms of Torch City, and Torch City has launched a counterattack, but we have no way of knowing the specifics. But Chunyuan said with a smile, you can't do it, right? I can tell you two things. The first thing is that after the failure of the Torch City to invade Iron Hammer Town, it did not stop. In the past 2 months during the period of time, they launched 3 attacks on General Tailong, the warlord of the Forsaken Warlord in the Red Zone in the north. However, Tailong retreated more than 50 kilometers very rarely. Torch City can also expand the results of the battle. Hank frowned and said, didn't they say that they lost an entire armored regiment in Hammer Town? How can they still have the ability to continue to launch active attacks? Also, from the information we have obtained, General Iron Dragon should be a tyrannical man. What caused him to retreat as much as 50 kilometers? Maybe there are other Nod warlords behind, or even the main force of Nod threatening Tailong. That's unknown. Chunyuan shook his head. What's the other thing? Drago asked. There is one more thing. The farm that General Tailong invaded and destroyed at the beginning is located on the northwest side of Torch City, but judging from the geographical situation of both sides, Tailong's sphere of influence is located on the northeast side of Torch City. That is to say, if it is not General Tailong has a special reason, otherwise he would have no reason to send a mobile force to attack an insignificant farm. There is also a very important message, Chunyuan said, his face became serious. The 3 offensives launched by Torch City all gathered and started from this destroyed farm. Chunyuan said his biggest harvest. It is impossible for large-scale weapons and equipment to be transported without clues, but the people in the city are completely unaware. In other words, these equipment must be transported through the underground transportation network, and the delivery location is unknown to everyone, or in other words, don't dare to go, Hank received in a low voice. The farm that was just destroyed by the Forsaken, and there may have been an extremely bloody massacre, it is absolutely impossible for ordinary people to get close to it. Drago also understood. However, how did you know the news? Hank turned his head and asked. The woman I was looking for yesterday happened to be an old friend of a Torch City officer. Chunyuan said rather ambiguously. Is this considered luck? Drago asked back. Luck is part of it. But you have to know that in such a troubled world, officers have a higher status than anyone else, so there is a high chance that they have other women or mistresses outside, even publicly. Yesterday I was walking around the bar, the woman named Yao Yao was dressed better than other women in the bar, and even used the most precious perfume in this world. And she often boasted that she knew important people in her words, so I deliberately approached her. Then, it's time to show off my manly charm, Chunyuan said proudly. I never thought it would be so easy to get close to a woman, Hank smiled wryly. He is also a straight man of steel, and this field is another world to him. That's it, it's good to have a big tool. Chen Yuyan patted him on the shoulder narrowly and smiled. And you obviously took 3 women away yesterday. Drago also said. Haha, there are 2 additional gifts. Chen Yuyan waved his hands, then turned to the topic and said, it seems that we need to go to that farm for a while. Hank also re-entered the state, and said in a deep voice, it's impossible to drive, and it's easy to be found. We can only walk there. How far is it? It's about 5 kilometers away from the urban area, including the distance across the city. If the 2 of us walk there, we can get there in an hour. Chen Yuyan said. 2 people? Drago asked. That's right. It's too conspicuous for the 3 of us to act together all the time. You stay here, and the most important thing is to watch over the car. Come to meet us immediately after receiving our notice. Chen Yuyan said. An hour later, Chen Yuyan and Hanka were still staying in an empty apartment near the edge of the city. In this city, entry is strict and exit is strict. It is basically not allowed to leave the city. Chen Yuyan frowned. Then let's act at night, Hank said. Chen Yuyan shook his head, we can't delay too long. The information here must be brought back to the ruined city as soon as possible, and then we need targeted preparations. He thought for a while, then looked at Hank's muscular body. I said, what size do you wear? What? Wait for me for 30 minutes. Chen Yuyan took out a combat uniform out of thin air and handed it to Hank. Hank took a look at it, but found that this set of combat uniforms was divided into 2 layers, and the inner layer was made of black biological materials, which was no different from the combat uniforms they wore in the USS, but the outer layer is gray, and it is composed of countless hexagons. Is this the kind of Victor? Hank looked familiar with this combat uniform. That's right, Victor's type of stealth combat uniform. Chen Yuyan replied with a nod. He had asked for this kind of combat uniform from Victor a long time ago to scan it, but it has been unable to manufacture it with level 4 technology. Now that the manufacturing center of the Infinite Base has been upgraded to level 4, it can be manufactured. This time he directly made 2 pieces and sent them directly with the Infinite Base's hyperspace teleportation function. It's true that you can get out of town with this set of equipment, but you have to go fast. We only have a minute, Hank said. Unlike the relatively loose checkpoints at the north road of Torch City, this place is completely heavily guarded. The 4 buildings on both sides of the road were reinforced with sandbags and barbed wire, and all the windows were nailed with wooden boards. Hundreds of various firearms were condescendingly aimed at this place. In addition, there are 2 tick tanks transformed into turrets on guard. The 6-barreled machine guns and 90mm caliber electric heat guns on the turrets are ready to fire at any time. In such a place, even if Chen Yuyan and Yi come here, they will only end up being torn to pieces by the 3-dimensional and intensive firepower. Moreover, the people who deployed the defense in Torch City were obviously very smart. If they came from outside the city, they would not be able to see the layout inside the city at the checkpoints outside the city. So if someone with malicious intentions comes over, most of them will go directly to the city without suspecting him. But when they entered the city and saw this arrangement in the direction of leaving the city, they could only feel extremely desperate. But by then, it was too late. Just like the 3 of Chen Yuyan and his party now, that's it. All Heaven's Unlimited Base. Author, Jingde Ren. Chapter 508. 502 Create Chaos. Are we sure we want to pass through such a line of defense? Drago scratched his head, took off the cloak he had been wearing all the time, exposed his mechanically transformed body, and began to put on the stealth combat suit. After confirming that the defense line outside the city was heavily guarded, Chen Yuyan called Drago over. Because in this case, it would be meaningless for him to stay behind, instead he would be trapped in the city and unable to come out. But in this way, they are desperate for this operation, and there is no way out. This is an optical stealth combat uniform. After charging for 10 minutes, you can activate the optical camouflage and enter the stealth state for 1 minute. But be careful, this is optical stealth, and it can't isolate the heat and sound of the body. Hanka said Drago demonstrated the use of combat uniforms. My body has been mechanically modified, so the radar can find me. I can't do anything about it. Drago said, spreading his hands. It's okay, your radar cross-section is very small, and the radar soldiers won't notice you immediately. Next, our direction of action is, Hanka explained to the two of them on a hand-drawn topographic map. Battle plan. After the explanation was over, and after confirming that both Chinyan and Drago had understood it, Hanka nodded heavily and said, remember. The invisibility time is only 1 minute. You must pass through the defense line within this time. Otherwise, God will not be able to save you even if God comes. Chinyan didn't say much, just nodded to express his understanding. Both Hank and Rupi are the best special tactics commanders he has ever seen, and he generally trusts them completely during combat. Now that Looper wants to retire, many times the Wolf Pack team is actually Hank in command. And at such times, Chinyan would put aside the issue of identity and completely obey their orders. At the checkpoint for leaving the city, people who want to leave the city lined up to wait for inspection. However, compared to the city of hundreds of thousands of people, there are only more than 20 people in line, which is really too little. The soldiers at the checkpoint strictly questioned everyone who wanted to leave the city, and unless it was confirmed and very necessary, they would not let them go at all. Sir, I work in Torch City. My hometown is Qingyang Town outside the city. I received a call yesterday that my mother is seriously ill. I must go back. Please. A middle-aged man blocked by guards people begged hard. No. Your situation is not within the scope of eligibility to leave the city. Get out of here. The soldier remained unmoved. Sir, please. I work in the rolling mill in the city, and I work very hard. I just want to go home and see my mother, just one look. Please, the man was still begging, and simply the son fell to his knees and wanted to hug the soldier's thigh. Get out of here. The soldier kicked the man to the ground impatiently. Seeing that he was going to climb this way, he immediately took out his pistol and hit the middle-aged man with a bang. The middle-aged man was suddenly frightened. He looked up at the bullet hole in front of him, and then at the black muzzle of the gun in the soldier's hand. He burst into tears, and then walked back step by step. Next. The soldier ignored him and shouted towards the back of the line. The middle-aged man looked at the team and at the soldiers who were waiting in full battle. Suddenly his face was ferocious, and he yelled, "I want to go out." As he said that, he rushed towards the checkpoint recklessly. The soldiers at the checkpoint immediately raised the Gao-3 assault rifle in their hands, ready to pull the trigger. In the crowd, a man wearing a cloak flashed a sharp light from the corner of his eyes, and he seized this fleeting opportunity to press the button. Boom! The moment the gunshot rang out and the middle-aged man fell down in response, a violent explosion erupted in an apartment building near the checkpoint, and the flames shot up into the sky in an instant. The people in line were frightened by the huge explosion, and the neat line suddenly dispersed. Headquarters, there is a situation here in the north of the city. All the soldiers were on alert immediately, and one of them immediately reported to his superiors. However, when everyone was paying attention to the explosion scene over there, no one noticed that 3 people in the crowd disappeared instantly. Almost at the same time, a jeep was suddenly started from the street and rushed towards the checkpoint frantically. Be careful! Someone breaks through. The soldiers at the checkpoint immediately raised their assault rifles and pulled the trigger without the slightest hesitation. Da-da-da-da-da. Da-da-da-da-da. The Gao-3 assault rifle fires extremely fast, and a large amount of bullets rains down on this jeep. However, this 5.56mm caliber bullet cannot destroy this crazy jeep in a short time. By the way, in this world, GDI still uses NATO standard bullets, because their predecessor is the Group of 7, G7. The Nod Brotherhood's main source of weapons at the beginning was the Middle East and East Asia. Later, they simply took the weapons seized from GDI to imitate them. So the current common infantry weapons of Nod and GDI are actually the same, but Nod's infantry weapons are often one model behind. At this time, the TIC tanks on both sides finally turned their muzzles. The 6-barreled machine gun fired countless bullets, instantly smashing the jeep into a sieve. However, the jeep is still moving forward under the influence of inertia. The soldiers at the checkpoint only saw the driver's seat of the jeep, but there was no one there. There was only a lump of disgusting rotten meat. Several tentacles sticking out of the rotten meat stuck to the steering wheel and gear of the jeep, and they were impressively controlling the jeep. And in the middle of the rotten meat, a terrifying eyeball is staring straight ahead. Run! The soldiers at the checkpoint only had time to exclaim, only to hear a loud bang, and the jeep suddenly exploded. A huge fireball soared into the air, and the soldiers at the checkpoint were immediately turned upside down. In the violent explosion, the rotten meat inside the jeep was also blown to pieces, and the meat was scattered everywhere. At this time, the fire power points in the buildings on both sides also fired wildly at the same time. Hundreds of bullets fired from various weapons were intertwined into a fire net, killing all the 20 or so civilians who were queuing up. However, no one noticed that some of the rotten meat splashed out with the explosion fell on the corpses of those civilians. Clear the scene immediately. See if there are any wings. The soldiers who survived the explosion came out from behind the bunker and began to clear the scene. No one saw 3 slightly distorted turbulences in the air moving fast. After running into the shadows of several buildings behind the checkpoint, a faint flash of lightning flashed through the air, and 3 figures in black combat uniforms and gray optical camouflage cloaks appeared here. This area did not break away from the defense line out of the city, so the 3 of them did not have any verbal communication. They just made gestures with each other, pointed to their wrists, and made a number 10. It means wait for 10 minutes to fully charge before moving on. They lie discreetly on the ground, using some surrounding bushes to camouflage themselves. At the same time, there was another riot at the checkpoint. Several corpses of civilians lying on the ground suddenly exploded from the ground, rushed forward and grabbed the nearest Torch City soldier and bit them. The soldiers didn't expect the corpse to jump up and bite people at all. They were caught off guard and were bitten in the neck, screaming terribly. Da-da-da-da. The other soldiers quickly shot and knocked down the corpses of the civilians who jumped up, and then fired wildly at the wriggling corpses on the ground. But at this moment, the soldier who was bitten just now suddenly rushed up from behind, and threw the soldier who fired the gun to the ground, biting wildly. Taking advantage of the chaos, Chunyuan and the others activated the optical camouflage again, and their figures disappeared from the air. They quickly left the checkpoint and headed towards the farm over there. At this moment, the checkpoint in the north of Torch City is already in chaos. Infected zombies are biting people everywhere, and many soldiers who don't know where they are infected, which further expands the chaos. Fortunately, reinforcements from other places kept coming. They set up a blockade around the checkpoint to prevent anyone from entering and exiting, and began to clean up the zombies with intensive firepower. Thank you for the 500 starting coins rewarded by fleeting years. All Heaven's Unlimited Base. Author, Jingde Ren. Chapter 509. 503, Remnants. Few squeak. A convertible car came quickly, and stopped at the city north checkpoint with a sudden brake. On the road, teams of soldiers in red and black Brotherhood of Nod combat uniforms were rushing to the scene of the accident. The door of the convertible car was opened, and the slender Marlowe and Ni Dong, who was wearing a large wrist armor, got out of the car and walked quickly towards the checkpoint. After the incident at the checkpoint, they left the rally immediately and rushed over to preside over the overall situation. "How's the situation?" Ni Dong raised his eyes and asked quietly. An officer immediately replied, "The situation has been brought under control, and all those walking dead who are biting people everywhere have been wiped out. Now we are cleaning the scene and counting the losses. It is estimated that we have lost more than 70 soldiers." Upon hearing this number, Marlowe's expression darkened immediately. "Hammertown. How dare they do that? It seems that people from Iron Hammer Town intend to spread the T-virus in Torch City, but fortunately, our defenses are tight and the virus has not spread." Ni Dong said, "It seems that we must continue to strengthen our security. The weapons of the T-virus are vulnerable to the modern army. It's just that they have been playing dirty tricks with us. Bastards. Hammertown. We didn't touch you, but you did it first. I'm going to find General Liu right now, immediately send troops to conquer Iron Hammer Town." Mara Wei was extremely resentful. "Don't be so impulsive. Now our primary goal is to reconnect with the Brotherhood of Nod as soon as possible. The giant wheel of war has begun to roll. If the mobilization and replacement of the army cannot be completed as soon as possible, we will be crushed by the torrent of steel from GDI." Ni Dong said, "Actually, I am more concerned about why the other party did this. It has no other effect except to anger us. That's needless to say. They just want to spread the T-virus in the city." Marlowe said bitterly. "If there are other more effective ways to spread the T-virus in the city, and we have also discussed this matter, as long as we don't push Hammer Town to a dead end, the other party will not use this kind of profitless method that will harm others and benefit ourselves. Way. So our strategy is to defeat Iron Hammer Town with a thunderbolt in a short time after we are ready, so that they have no chance to use the T-virus." Ni Dong shook his head. "Actually, I think they should want to break through, but failed," the officer said from the side. "Chongguan. You mean, they want to go out in the city?" Ni Dong frowned. "Then how are you sure they failed?" The officer hurriedly said, "Because although our checkpoint was attacked, the bomb on the jeep was not large enough to cause much damage. The Walking Dead after that just made the scene very chaotic. But from beginning to end in the end we all maintained control of the checkpoint, and we were pretty sure no one escaped. The video surveillance also confirmed that." "Failed? In other words, they are still in the city?" Ni Dong rubbed his chin and thought. "Then seal off the whole city immediately and search carefully." Marrow said loudly. "No. They didn't fail." Suddenly a somewhat abrupt voice came from behind. Marlowe turned her head suddenly, but saw a very young soldier talking, and he seemed familiar. However, it was absolutely unacceptable for Marrow to be robbed by the most inferior soldier. She scolded, "You are not qualified to speak here, soldier. Where is your squad leader?" "Wait a minute." Ni Dong stretched out his hand and interrupted Marlowe's words. He said to the soldier, "I remember you. You are one of the survivors of Feng Tao's army, Duan Hessian, who was temporarily transferred by Feng Tao to become a staff officer, right?" "Yes." The young soldier's eyes glowed with excitement. He had been waiting for a long time for the day when he would be able to stand out. After his parents died in Hammer Town, he blamed all the crimes on the leader of Hammer Town. And he is also very clear that if he wants to take revenge, it is absolutely impossible to do it with his own strength. The only chance is to rely on the Torch City. However, to his surprise, after he returned to Torch City with the defeated soldiers, Lu Weiwei punished everyone including him involuntarily. He was given 10 lashes and thrown into the army as a low-level ordinary soldier. And now, finally found the opportunity. "Tell me what you think." Ni Dong said lightly. The corners of Duan Hessian's mouth turned up slightly, finally waiting for the opportunity. He said loudly, the opponent's target is the farm in the north of the city. And they may have already passed. Oh. Why are you so sure they will go to the farm in the north of the city? There is nothing but ruins there. Ni Dong narrowed his eyes. If they want to leave the city in such a drastic way, they will definitely choose the east of the city to leave, but they chose the north of the city. This is very telling. The reason why I think they have already left is because the riots caused this time actually each has already prayed for the desired effect, whether it is your assertion that the yield of the Jeep bomb is too small or that the T-virus cannot fight against modern weapons, it is actually in the plan of the other party. The three elements of carrying out an action include time, environment, and people. In fact, you haven't taken any actions beyond the norm in any of these three elements. That is to say, although you have done what you should do, they have already expected this. So although I don't know what method they used, it is certain that they have achieved their goal and left. Du and Hessian said in one breath. Ni Dong sneered and said, "You haven't answered me yet, what is there in the farm in the north of the city?" Du and Hessian said, "This is actually not difficult to infer, because several military operations in Torch City have." "Enough. Take him, let's go." Ni Dong didn't wait for him to finish speaking, he waved his hand and turned around to prepare to leave. Marlowe grabbed the thin Du and Hessian as easily as if she was holding a chicken, and followed behind Ni Dong. Although Du and Hessian's expression was very uncomfortable and painful, there was a faint smile at the corner of his mouth. On the other side, Chunyuan, Hank, and Drago had already left Torch City and came to the farm in the north of the city under the cover of optical camouflage combat uniforms. "It seems that everything is in the plan. I didn't expect you to be a master of tactics." Drago admired Hank, deliberately limit the power of the bomb to a certain extent, coupled with the limited T-virus leak, deliberately create the illusion that we failed to break through and escape, so that their pursuit must be mainly in the city. Hanka said lightly, "A plan is a plan, and there is a possibility of failure, but it does work so far, but we still have to be prepared to guard against all situations. I used to think that you were better at using sniper rifles, but this time I am impressed." Chunyuan said to Drago. "I have been walking on this land for many years. If I only knew how to use a sniper rifle, I would have died long ago." Drago replied, but it was obvious that he still enjoyed the compliment. "Hank has already taken out the binoculars and checked the direction of the farm from a distance. He lowered his voice and said, 'It's still too far away. If you want to know more information, you'd better get closer to be able to determine the type and scale of the equipment transported by Nod. It's the best. Thank you for the 100 starting coins rewarded under the White Moon. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. All Heaven's Unlimited Base. Author, Jingde Ren. Chapter 510. 504 Powerful Strength. Humbuzz. The dull sound of the engine sounded, and a large container truck drove out of a huge warehouse and drove into a field that had been burned and flattened. Several workers opened the container door, and the driver walked into the container. Another burst of engine sound came from inside, and attack motorcycles were driven out and parked neatly beside them. These attack motorcycles have already undergone final adjustments, the fully enclosed cockpit has been polished, and the quadruple rocket launchers on both sides of the rear are already filled with rockets. The huge warehouse seems to be magical, and a large number of vehicles are constantly driving out of it. Some trucks are carrying battle vehicles, others are carrying ammo and supplies, and there are even trucks with impressively heavy tick tanks on the back. And there were actually 3 such huge warehouses, and a steady stream of supplies and equipment came out of them. The 3 of Chunyuan and the others carefully hid in a bush, less than 500 meters away from the farm that had become a military base. They used binoculars to observe the weapons and equipment in the base, silently counting the number. Apart from attack motorcycles and tick tanks, There are many other equipment that Chunyuan has never seen before. There is an off-road vehicle covered with a layer of armor. From the large tires and high suspension, it can be seen that the off-road performance of this off-road vehicle can be said to be several grades of crushing the Hummer Jeep. Moreover, two 12.7mm caliber remote-controlled machine guns are installed on the roof, with strong firepower. There is also a very strange tank that is also very conspicuous. This tank is boxy and does not have any protrusions such as turrets and cabs. It looks like a matchbox. But the body is very huge, almost 3 meters high and 7 or 8 meters long. It can be said to be a giant. However, the track of this kind of tank is as high as the body. This design is like the world's first official model tank, the Grand Nomad Mk-1. The efficiency is very low. I don't know why it is already in the near future. Technology has to adopt such a design. And the most frightening thing is that right in front of this tank, there are two huge rollers with the same width as the body. The rollers are densely covered with alloy barbs, just like a meat grinder. In addition, it can be seen that many self-propelled artillery have been parked in the base. These self-propelled artillery can be seen at a glance to understand that the degree of automation is very high, and the caliber of the artillery is at least 200 millimeters. There is also a conical vehicle. The whole front of the car is a huge drill bit, but the body is very wide and streamlined. And almost all the vehicles are red and black, without any camouflage at all. It seems that NOD is more concerned with promoting their own markings than the slight camouflage effect of camouflage. These vehicles are basically not in a regular shape, and most of them are designed in strange shapes, so Chunyuan couldn't help but whispered, "Isn't it enough to design weapons and equipment well? Why do you have to make it so non-mainstream? These equipment are not just non-mainstream." Drago whispered, "This is the style that NOD has developed after 30 years of defeat in the last world-class war with GDI. What style? They will not confront GDI head-on, because facts have proven that all resistance is futile in the face of GDI's steel torrent. The only chance of victory is not to give GDI a chance to face. Drago is well informed. Guang started to give Chunyuan cap. That huge square tank is the devil's tongue. This kind of tank can move underground. The one with the drill in front is the same, but it is a kind of personnel carrier. Operation underground? You mean?" Chunyuan frowned, "how is this possible? Even a professional drilling rig can't drive machinery underground. Let alone tanks and personnel carriers. The Brotherhood of NOD has long mastered the method of using tiberium mines as energy sources, so the energy supply of these vehicles is unimaginable to us. Moreover, because of the continuous erosion of tiberium mines, the ground in the wild is actually it is soft, because the minerals in the soil have been absorbed by the tiberium mine. So this gives this type of tank room to play. They can easily move forward in the soft ground, and the speed is not slow." Delagie said. Chunyuan observed with the binoculars, and said in a deep voice, "So you mean, the Brotherhood of NOD has the ability to dig an army equipped with tanks from the ground directly into the opponent's house?" Drago nodded, "That's right, so you understand why GDI can only advance slowly in 30 years even after defeating NOD?" At this time, Hank's voice came, 167 tick tanks, 28 square tanks, 84 conical armored vehicles, 205 self-propelled artillery, 188 attack motorcycles, and 379 armed off-road vehicles. Yes, compared to the forces that are not placed in the space, this is basically the configuration of an armored division. Damn! A whole armored division? Then you're going to beat me up? How did you get so many troops before Torch City?" Chunyuan scolded. "The armored division has very high requirements for the professionalism of its soldiers. It is certain that many soldiers came from NOD to support them, or in other words, NOD directly transferred a unit here." Drago said. "With our current strength, even if we have power armor and robot troops, there is absolutely no possibility of fighting an armored division. Don't look at the majesty of Iron Guard robots and tank robots, but that is relative to infantry. If in a real fight, they are no match for tanks at all. Chen Yuyan gritted his teeth. Not to mention tanks, our artillery is seriously insufficient. With the LG-01 light howitzer, it is impossible to suppress the opponent's large self-propelled artillery with a caliber of at least 200 mm. The final result can only be that we are unilaterally beaten. Han Ke said slowly. How is Nod's air power? Chen Yuyan asked. It can be said to be very weak, because most of the airports will be destroyed by GDI as soon as they are found, coupled with the existence of ion storms, so Nod has very few fixed-wing aircraft. Most of the time they use a weapon called Harpy, light-armed helicopters. The threat is not great. Then what if they encounter GDI's plane? Escape in all directions, break up into pieces, burrow, become invisible, or use anti-aircraft weapons to fight them. But the gap is not that big, and the size of GDI's air force is also very limited, because when the ion storm comes, the planes are in groups, it falls down, and it cannot be picked up. Chen Yuyan nodded silently, and began to think continuously in his heart. At this moment, Hank suddenly said, "Be careful. The deployment in the base has changed." Chen Yuyan looked over, and sure enough, he found that there were a lot of heavily armed soldiers in the base at some point. These soldiers are constantly checking the base from the inside to the outside, and are constantly expanding the scope of patrols. They are obviously prepared. They have already discovered our little trick, and they are sure that we have come to the farm in the north of the city. Hank said. Chen Yuyan waved his hand without hesitation and said, "We will retreat to the west, and they will definitely focus on defense in the east. After leaving the base for a certain distance, I will build a jeep to drive us back. It's just not enough, we are too close. As long as we make a big move, we will be found immediately." Hanka said. "How about grabbing a car?" Drago made an opinion, but he immediately denied himself. "Forget it, grabbing a car in front of an entire armored division, I might as well just find a place to crash it to death." "Armorer, armorer, armorer," Chen Yuyan muttered to himself, and suddenly his eyes lit up. "Humph. If that's the case, then I'll give them a surprise first. Thank you for the 1,100 starting coins rewarded by the Great Demon King of the Abyss. All Heavens Unlimited Base. Author, Jingde Ren. Chapter 511. 505 Surprise. The first row is going to the direction of 8 o'clock. The second row is going to the direction of 11 o'clock. The third row is going to the direction of 1 o'clock. Focus on searching the bushes over there, don't miss any places. The other party's spies are probably spying around us," an officer ordered loudly. Soldiers wearing red and black Nod military uniforms and full coverage helmets came out of the barracks one after another, separated towards the surroundings according to the command of the officer, spread out into a fan, and searched all places. Soon, Marlowe and Ni Dong also brought Duan Heshen to the base headquarters. Marlowe casually threw Duan Heshen on the ground and ignored them. Instead, she and Ni Dong commanded the troops to search around. Duan Heshen was very tactful and did not speak. He understood that this was not the time for him to show his presence. "Did you find anything?" Ni Dong asked. "At present, the search circle has been expanded to 500 meters around the base, and it has not been found yet. There are now 2 platoons of troops searching in the bushes," the staff officer on the side said. Ni Dong nodded, and ordered, "The area of the shrub forest is not small, send another platoon there. Don't miss any place." "Yes." However, at this time, Duan Heshen suddenly said, "It is recommended to turn on the active infantry radar." His voice was so low that only Ni Dong could hear it. Ni Dong gave him a cold look, and said, "We are looking for 3 people, not tanks. Now turn on the radar, and there is nothing but the signals of our own tanks that fill the screen. His attitude towards Duan Heshen was different, but he still retorted. If it was Maro, she probably wouldn't get anything but a big beating. Yes, the other party thinks the same way, and the other party also thinks that we think so. When there is no clue, we need to jump out of the circle and do some behaviors that are different from what we expected, but sometimes it is this kind of behavior that can act. It had an unexpected effect. Duan Heshen's voice was still very small. This kind of communication would not make him appear too high profile, and this behavior itself could be regarded as a small flattery to Ni Dong. Ni Dong was quite disapproving, but before he could refute, suddenly a messenger came in from the door and shouted, "Sir! We lost contact with the 3rd platoon." Maro turned her head sharply and said loudly, "Lost contact? Which one is in the other row in the bush?" "It's the 4th row of 2nd Lieutenant Guan Biao. Let them evacuate the bushes immediately. Send out the tank troops and burn the bushes down." Maro said immediately. "Don't set fire." Duan Heshen still whispered behind Ni Dong, "The heat, flames, and thick smoke produced by setting fire will become obstacles to our search. And even after the fire, it is difficult for us to confirm the other party's identity in the ruins. Life and death." Ni Dong nodded slightly, turned his head and said, "Don't set fire. Let the attacking motorcycles and armed off-road vehicles block off the bushes immediately. The tank troops cooperate with the infantry troops to enter the bushes. Maro, we will fight in person. Duan Heshen, you and I together. The whole base immediately act." Although there are only more than 1,000 soldiers in the base, there are all kinds of weapons and equipment here. Immediately, teams of attack motorcycles and armed off-road vehicles drove out of the base quickly and marched around the bushes. At the same time, a formation of more than 20 tick tanks also began to move. Ni Dong took Duan Heshen and Maro together in an armored vehicle, looking at the bushes through the optical scope. They didn't poke their heads out hastily. With their current strength in the silver group, they weren't strong enough to ignore sniper rifles. They didn't dare to show their heads when a whole row of 20 to 30 people suddenly lost contact. Not long after entering the bushes, the armored troops in front sent a message, "We found a large number of corpses. They are all in the 3rd row. What's going on in the 3rd row? Where's the enemy?" Ni Dong yelled into the microphone. It was all injured by sharp claws. The corpses were basically mutilated. Vomit. A soldier over there had already taken off his helmet and vomited. The situation at the scene was a mess, and the fragmented corpses and the strong smell of blood made people feel almost collapsed. "Be careful. This may be the opponent's strong man." The tank troops rush forward. "Don't clean up the corpses for now." Ni Dong continued to order. He looked at Duan Heshen again, and said, "Turn on the millimeter wave radar and conduct a comprehensive survey of the bushes." Scanning. "Sir, didn't the other party say that there are only 3 people? It shouldn't be detected by turning on the active radar. Maybe the radar waves will be located by GDI," the soldier in the communication asked in a low voice. "Open." "Yes." The soldier in front responded immediately, then switched the communication channel and said a few words loudly. In the middle of the base, a truck drove out, and the radar antenna behind the car began to rotate, aiming at the direction of the bushes. In an environment like the woods, the battlefield radar used by infantry has insufficient penetration and too much interference, which may not be useful. And this medium-sized vehicle-mounted millimeter wave radar can just make up for this shortcoming. However, if a GDI satellite happens to pass by at this time, the fun will be great. For this kind of situation where the active radar is turned on, as long as GDI finds out, it doesn't mind rewarding a wave of air strikes. Not to mention that the East 3rd District is just a mountain away from GDI's control area. Unexpectedly, not long after the radar was turned on, the radar soldier suddenly sent a communication in panic, "Report. Unidentified target found. Where is it? Ni Dong's expression changed. Right among you. There are at least 20 of you. Ni Dong hurriedly kicked open the hatch of the armored vehicle and said loudly, "Everyone, get ready for battle. The enemies are all around us." Everyone looked around immediately, but there was nothing. A soldier said nervously, "Where? Where?" "Sir, I didn't find any eyes nearby." Before he finished speaking, a black shadow suddenly rose from the ground, and the extremely sharp alloy blade flashed in the air. The soldier was split in two before he finished speaking. "The enemy is underground." Ni Dong shouted angrily, and rushed towards the black shadow. All I saw was that his ankles suddenly spread out, and an extremely strong airflow spewed out, driving him straight towards it like a bullet, and then punched that thing hard. Bang! The thing was smashed into the air by a punch and hit a tree and turned into a pile of scrap metal. Only then did Ni Dong see clearly that this thing was a small machine with a diameter of about 1 meter. This kind of machine has 4 incomparably sharp chelicerae, and a drill bit in its abdomen. It looks like a mechanical spider. It's a terrifying robot. Ni Dong immediately recognized this kind of robot, and then he only felt boundless fear spreading in his heart, and his whole body was cold, as if a bucket of ice water was pouring from head to toe. "All tanks retreat immediately." "Tank!" he roared hoarsely. Those armored soldiers didn't know what happened, but they still obeyed the order and started driving the tanks to turn around. But they are still one step too late. I only saw a large number of the same terrifying robots suddenly drilled out of the surrounding underground. They were extremely fast. After rushing out, they immediately rushed towards the surrounding tanks. "What is this? Fire! Fire! Da-da-da! Da-da-da!" Gunshots and panicked shouts immediately filled the battlefield. Thank you for the 1,000 starting coins rewarded by the strong wind and angry horse and the waning moon. Thanks to the book friend 1605100659144481 for the reward of 100 starting coins. All Heavens Unlimited Base. Author, Jingde Ren. Chapter 512. Chapter 512. The recent update is very confusing, almost stagnant, mainly due to work reasons. When I wrote The Mechanic of Infinite Legend before, Xiaojing worked in the Government Affairs Center, mainly doing some paperwork. The pressure was not great, and of course the salary was very low. So at that time, I had a lot of time to write code words. 6,000 words a day was guaranteed, and 8,000 words a day was fine once in a while. Coupled with the low wages at that time, writing books became the main source of income. And if I open Word to code, even if someone comes over, they won't think that I am doing something unrelated to work, right? Well, don't sue me. But after my child was born, things changed, mainly to take care of the child. And the situation of my child, well, let's not mention it. Therefore, the mechanic can only guarantee 4,000 updates per day in the later stage. Then the mechanic was blocked, and it has not been unblocked, and I suddenly lost my main source of income. Then just at this time, that is, in June last year, my job was transferred and I went to a unit with a more specific business. In the new unit, the salary is a little more, but things have also changed a lot. In addition, there is no machinist and the performance of the new book is not as good as expected, so my main energy can only be focused on work and children. Since then, I have had very little time to type. Then from last month, our unit needed to do a very large project, and since then, I basically spent 8 hours a day on work and didn't have time at all. In addition to going home at night to take care of the children, the time to code every day can only be after 10 p.m. The only exception is Sunday, because I have to take my children to the provincial capital for class on Sunday, and class time has become my only quiet time every week. So the updates during that time were of no quality, because I needed to code 4,000 words in 2 hours to have full attendance. Later, I couldn't stand it any longer, so I had no choice but to decide not to give full attendance or a half-year bonus, so as not to let my body collapse first. As a result, the update became what it is now. And depending on the situation, it is estimated that it will last for at least a month, so the update during this period is really impossible to guarantee. I hope I can have time to continue coding after this project is finished. I'm ashamed to say that I hope everyone will continue to support such words, but I will definitely come back. Sorry for the above, and thank you all. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. All Heaven's Unlimited Base. Author, Jingde Ren. Chapter 513. 506 Chaotic War. More than 20 terrorist robots jumped up from the armored troops of Torch City almost at the same time. Their alloy claws moved quickly, and rushed to the surrounding tanks almost instantly. Fire! Fire! The panicked soldiers pulled the trigger desperately, and countless bullets were fired randomly in the bushes. However, there were terrorist robots in almost every direction. Those soldiers fired in all directions, and even accidentally injured many of their own people. Suddenly, there were screams and the scene fell into chaos. Some of the messy bullets also hit the terrorist robots. Their fragile armor could not defend against even the shooting of small-caliber assault rifles, and several of them were immediately destroyed, with parts scattered all over the place. But more terrorist robots are already unstoppable. They flexibly waved the alloy claws, cutting all the soldiers blocking the way into pieces. Immediately afterwards, they drilled into the bottom of the tank one after another, making it impossible for the soldiers to shoot at all. After getting into the bottom of the tank, the terrorist robot fixed itself on the chassis with alloy claws, and then the drill bit in the abdomen started to work, spinning rapidly, cutting the fragile chassis of the tank little by little. The sizzling sound of metal friction made one's teeth ache, and the driver inside the tank heard the sound as if he heard the bell urging him to die. The timid drivers have already opened the hatches to escape, while the relatively calm drivers quickly turned around and retreated out of the bushes. Maraway! Clean up those horrible robots! Ni Dong shouted. Maro reacted quickly, and immediately bent down and got under the tank chassis. Her limbs are unimaginably flexible. Under the narrow and low tank chassis, in a space where it is difficult for normal people to move, she can still move freely with the strength of her ankles and wrists. The terrifying robot in front of him had already cut a hole in the chassis of the tank, and when he saw Maro approaching, the terrifying robot immediately raised its alloy pincers and chopped it off. Maro was extremely flexible. Suddenly, she pushed her wrist back more than a meter, avoiding the attack of the terrifying robot. Then her thigh muscles trembled, and she rushed forward like a bullet, hitting the terrifying robot with a hard punch. In pieces. Ni Dong also destroyed the terrifying robots that hadn't entered the tank chassis outside, but the situation in the entire bush was already difficult to deal with, the chaos intensified, and the soldiers even had a tendency to run away in all directions. A terrifying robot sliced open the chassis of the tick tank and got in directly through the hole. The members inside the tank were shocked when they saw the robot that suddenly came in. The captain took out his pistol and wanted to shoot, but the terrorist robot cut off his right hand. Immediately afterwards, there was a shrill scream from inside the tank, and gurgling blood continued to flow out of the holes in the chassis. Retreat! Retreat! Quick! Let the base set up a second line of defense around the bushes. Don't let the terrorist robots have any more chances. Ni Dong said loudly. Duan Heshan suddenly grabbed Ni Dong's hand, and said very firmly, they must still be in the bush now. If they withdraw now, they will definitely take advantage of the chaos and escape. At that time, they will really be unable to catch them. Ni Dong hesitated for a moment, then pushed a soldier next to him away again, and smashed the terrifying robot that was rushing to pieces with another punch, and said loudly, "Retreat. Everyone retreat. Marlowe. Come here with me. Together. Find those mice." Bang. A deformed horror robot wreckage flew out from under a tick tank, and Marrow quickly crawled out. The other party must be an experimenter. There is no way for ordinary people to run around with so many horror robots. If that's the case, we'll hit the jackpot. Ni Dong turned his head and shouted at Duan Hessian, "Duan Hessian. Do you have a way to find them? Continue to scan with the millimeter wave radar. Track every target in the bush. Then remove our own signal and the signal of the terrorist robot, and compare the action patterns of the remaining signals to find out." Duan Hessian's eyes flashed with excitement. "Look, it's finally time for him to perform on the stage." Marlowe pointed to the tanks running around and the infantry retreating hastily. "Now that this place is in such a mess, how do we get rid of the signal of the terrorist robot? I have counted just now, there are 22 terrorist robots here. 8 were destroyed, and the rest are basically on the tank chassis. I have written down the positions of those tanks. Give me a set and radar the computer connected to the facility. I will now compare the location data with the radar data." Duan Hessian said quickly. "Then do it quickly." Ni Dong said loudly. Duan Hessian came to the armored vehicle that Ni Dong and the others were riding in that had been converted into a command vehicle, sat in front of the command computer, and took a deep breath. During the few months when he was sent to the grassroots as ordinary soldiers, most of the other members of the staff of Feng Tao's army who came together had to live a muddle-headed life, but he didn't. Duan Hessian. He used this time to eagerly learn any knowledge related to combat and the army. In addition, his talent was different from ordinary people, and his growth rate was even faster. He started to operate on the computer quickly, and the very messy radar reflection signals in the bushes appeared on the screen, and it was impossible for another person to distinguish the specific situation inside. But Duan Hessian didn't flinch. He compared the situation on the battlefield while quickly making marks on the screen, and then filtered these radar signals over and over again. Then he suddenly looked terrified, and said loudly into the communicator, "There are 2 strange signals. Just at your 1 o'clock direction, 50 meters away. They are approaching an empty tank." Ni Dong hurriedly ran over there, his ankles unfolded like a machine again, revealing a tiny nozzle, from which a burst of high-pressure airflow spewed out, accelerating forward like a bullet. Over there is an empty tick tank, and the terror robot slices through the tank's chassis, killing the entire crew inside. There was already a large pool of blood flowing under the tank. After Ni Dong rushed over, he only had time to see a figure entering the tank through the hatch. Immediately afterwards, the turret of the tick tank began to rotate, and the black barrels of the 90mm caliber electric heat gun and the 6-barreled machine gun were facing here. "Damn it!" Ni Dong cursed angrily, and the tiny nozzle on his ankle spewed out another stream of air. His figure abruptly turned in one direction, and he stumbled to the other side. Boom! Almost at the same time, a shell exploded where he was standing just now, and Ni Dong felt as if his back had been hit hard, and he rolled on the ground to counteract the shock wave, while continuing to run wildly without stopping. Hey! The rain of bullets fired from the 6-barreled machine gun plowed a long trail on the ground and swept towards Ni Dong. Ni Dong activated the spray device again and rushed forward, finally dodging the burst of shooting. Then he quickly moved to the blind spot where the turret was shooting, then quickly ran over, got into the chassis and got in through the cut hole. He entered the interior of the tank, and as soon as he looked up, he saw 2 dull-faced people manipulating the tank, and their movements were extremely skillful. "Thank you for entering the 10,000 starting point coins whose nickname has been tipped. Thank you for the 1,000 starting coins rewarded by the assimilation fighters. Thanks to Shanghai Beat 01 for rewarding 500 starting coins. All Heavens Unlimited Base." Author, Jingde Ren. Chapter 514. 507 Escape. The situation in front of Ni Dong was a little weird, even a little scary. There are two members of the Tic Tank, and the previous members have been cut into countless pieces by the terrorist robots, and blood and stumps are everywhere in the cockpit. The strong smell of blood was sealed in the cockpit, and the feeling after entering it could make people spit out their overnight meal. Even Ni Dong, who had experienced many bloody storms, felt a little uncomfortable, but he saw two people manipulating the tank. These two people didn't waver at all amidst the blood and minced meat. Even the man in the driver's seat was grabbing the joystick with a piece of bloody intestines hanging on it, completely unmoved. They didn't wear clothes, and the skin on their bodies looked like pieces of hanging dead flesh, without any vitality at all, and there were even traces of stitches. When someone came in, the two people turned their heads. Their eyes are dull and lifeless, and they don't have any expressions, very indifferent. Is it a zombie? Ni Dong's first reaction was this. And at this time, he couldn't help him to study these two terrifying human figures, because they had left their seats and grabbed them with open arms. You bastard who is pretending to be a ghost. Ni Dong cursed angrily, only to see the back of his thick wrist armor suddenly unfold, and then a burst of high-pressure gas was ejected. Under the action of the gas jet, his fist was like a cannonball, and even in the narrow space of the cockpit, it instantly accelerated to nearly the speed of sound. Boom! With a muffled sound, the figure at the captain's position was directly smashed to pieces by his punch. Countless parts and wires fell out of the scattered bodies. Ni Dong narrowed his eyes. This is a robot. Before he could walk in and kill the doll in the driver's seat, the doll had already sat back in the driver's seat, grabbing the joystick and pulling hard. The tank made a sudden turn, and crashed into the paralyzed other tank in front of it. Ni Dong was caught off guard, and was slammed into the bulkhead by the sharp turn. As soon as he got up, the two tanks collided. Boom! There was a loud noise, and the jolt caused Ni Dong to stagger again. And that figure also fell to the ground. At this time its emotionless eyes were fixedly staring at Ni Dong, and the eyes gradually began to turn red. Ni Dong yelled in his heart, and used his fastest speed to get out of the tank from the hole in the chassis. Before he landed, there was only a loud bang, and the figure exploded. The power of the explosion in the closed space of the cockpit was constantly superimposed to a terrifying level, and the flames of the explosion burst out from every gap in the Tic Tank. And Ni Dong, who was right next to the hole, was hit directly by the gushing flames and shock waves. Ni Dong had already been blown into a daze, and he didn't realize that the energy device of the tank was on fire, and a second explosion would happen soon. At this critical moment, Maro had already run over. She quickly lay down on the ground, hanging on the tank chassis with her left hand, while her right hand and right foot hugged Ni Dong in a very strange posture and pulled him violently come out. Her posture is very strange. It doesn't change the joint direction of normal human beings, but she is able to make this unbelievable posture. Then Marlo carried Ni Dong on her back and ran out desperately. Just behind them, there was another roar of explosion. The Tic Tank was completely destroyed in the explosion, and the entire body was blown into a twisted mass of scrap metal by the explosion from the inside out. Robot, I'm humming a robot. Ni Dong finally came back to his senses and cursed, and it's a humming very smart robot. What's going on? Maro Wei asked, frowning. Two robots ran into the Tic Tank, and I went in to kill them. Their combat effectiveness was mediocre, but after finding out that they couldn't beat me, one of the robots actually drove the tank into another tank, and when I reacted it blew itself up the moment it came here. I'm a humming idiot. It's impossible for an ordinary robot to have such an IQ. Ni Dong's glasses also disappeared in the explosion just now, and he yelled at him completely disregarding his usual image. In other words, the two ordinary robots of the opponent almost capsized you, a Silver Group experimenter, in the gutter. Mero's face also became gloomy. It wasn't because of Ni Dong's performance, but because of the other party's unexpectedly difficult attitude. At this time, Duan Hessian's voice came from the communicator. "Don't worry about those two robots, I caught a radar signal again, and I'm heading towards the east side of the bush. Go right away." Mero immediately supported Ni Dong and ran towards the armored vehicle. Ni Dong took her hand away, ran up by himself, and nodded to indicate that he was fine. He asked as he ran, "Is there only one person?" "I'm not sure. You should know that even the millimeter wave radar is not very reliable in detecting people in the forest environment. But this signal is relatively strong. I suspect that the other party's body has been mechanically modified, so he was captured," Duan Hessian said. Before he could finish his sentence, Ni Dong and Marlowe jumped onto the armored vehicle and followed Duan Hessian's guidance to move forward at full speed. A horror robot jumped onto the armored vehicle to wreak havoc, but was sent flying by Mero's punch. Ni Dong's eyes were bloodshot as he was driving the armored car, and he was extremely angry. On the east side of the bush, Chenyuyan, Hank, and Drago were running wildly outside. While running, Chenyuyan dropped the just-produced terrifying robot and anti-tank mines. After the Infinity Base was upgraded to level 4, the production of products of level 2 technology such as Terror Robot became very fast. Now he has almost stopped the daily work of every production line, and made all his efforts to make it for him, and then sent it to him through the teleportation function. Come next. The production of 2 second-generation synths just now was entirely a temporary idea after he saw that some tick tanks had been cleaned up by terrorist robots. He just planned to let the 2 second-generation synths drive tanks to cause some troubles. Create more opportunities for him to escape. On the opposite side is an entire armored division here. Even if there are not so many soldiers in the base, he never fantasizes about taking a little advantage. If you worry about whether you can kill a few more tanks, the result is often that you miss the best time to escape and get stuck inside. So although with the help of unlimited base, Chenyuyan had the confidence to wipe out the tank unit that entered the bush, but he still ran away without hesitation. Drago turned his head 180 degrees as he ran, looked at it for a moment, then turned back and said, "There's an armored vehicle coming up, very fast. I lost at least 10 terrorist robots along the way, and this armored vehicle has not been destroyed yet. Then there is only one possibility. The driver of the armored vehicle is one or more powerful people. Don't delay, let them if they are entangled, we have to stay when the big troops come." Chenyuyan looked solemnly. As he spoke, he began to let the manufacturing center continuously produce M19 anti-tank mines, and then threw them towards the back. At the same time, Hank also led them to turn several times in a row, but the other party seemed to have already locked the position here, chasing after him. And what made Chenyuyan vomit blood was that he threw at least a dozen anti-tank mines to the back, but the armored vehicle never triggered it. In the final analysis, on the one hand, it was bad luck, on the other hand, landmines still had to have a certain number of bases to be buried in a concentrated manner to play a role. It was really fate that Xiang Chenyuyan threw the landmines scattered, and it exploded. "There's a car ahead." Drago's modified eyes were much sharper than Chenyuyan's. "Come on." Chenyuyan yelled, and they rushed over, and they saw an armed off-road vehicle parked next to a bush, and a soldier seemed to be hissing next to him. Hank immediately raised his gun to shoot, and shot the soldier between the eyebrows before the soldier could react. The soldier fell to the ground in response, while another member of the off-road vehicle hurriedly manipulated the dual-mounted remote-controlled machine guns on the roof to prepare to shoot. And Chenyuyan's eyes were fixed on the rotation angle of the remote control machine gun, and his steps suddenly accelerated, moving sideways continuously, disturbing the opponent's shooting angle. Then kicked up and kicked directly through the front windshield. At the same time that the commander's armored car with the antenna hanging on the roof of the car rushed out of the bushes, Chenyuyan and the others were already driving away in an armed off-road vehicle. Thank you for the 1000 starting coins rewarded by Star Sea Rangers.